I did from 96 to 2003.
That's a third strike. How much time did you get?
25 to life.
And they don't give you no good time, good behavior, and all that
You
shit.
85% of whatever they gave.
I feel like my life on the line. Jungle in these streets, pick the beats on the line. Hustle to increase, put it all on the line. House, big spouse, family, freedom, walking yards on the line. Every day I wake, feel like my life on the line. Jungle in these streets, pick the beats on the line.
All right, sitting next to me is a gentleman that's retired. LAPD, grew up in LA, in South Central LA.
60th and Crenshaw.
60th and Crenshaw.
Yes.
Now, growing up in the city before you even thought about getting in law enforcement, how was your childhood? Like, what high school you went to and that sort of thing?
I was part of the group that got bussed out to Westchester. I lived in Crenshaw District, was supposed to go to Crenshaw High School. Ended up getting bussed out, so I was part of the third group of kids in 1975 that got bussed out to Westchester.
Okay.
So I actually was getting bussed out to the junior high school before that. I didn't even go to school in my neighborhood. I had to go to school outside because that's what they were doing to us back then, trying to integrate. So it was different, but one of the things that helped me out was having older cousins, a lot of them uncles that were in different clubs back in the day. I had cousins that were part of Slauson Village. I had cousins that were part of the Deuces Motorcycle Club, part of the Chosen Few. And I grew up with cousins that had been part of a lot of the groups that were before Crips and Bloods. So growing up, I got to see this growing up. So it kind of, fed me into the street lifestyle. So I understood that growing up before I was a teenager. I already knew what was going on in the streets. I chose law enforcement, and I had the biggest support was from my cousins because of the fact that I said that we can't continue to fight from the outside. I had 37 years with LAPD, and I spent my entire career fighting. I'm probably on a whole lot of S lists with a lot of command staff and other people, but didn't like the way I came at them and the way I tried to change things from the inside out. And I put people on blast all the time. So growing up basically formed my opinion of how the community should be policed. And it's because I tell people all the time that being a gamer doesn't make you a bad guy. It's the activity you do that makes you a bad guy.
Right.
You know, if you prey on your own people and you do things, to me, you're being a bad guy. But being a member of a gang, being a member of a bike club, being a member of all that stuff, that don't make you a bad guy.
So were you the only law enforcement person that came out of your family, or the first, or the second?
I was actually the third.
The third?
Yeah, I had two cousins, and two uncles and a cousin that were sheriff deputies before me. They ended up leaving the profession because they didn't like what was going on. They ended up they just couldn't take it. You know, they didn't want to fight that fight anymore. So
you stayed throughout the duration?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, I know you go through different steps but once you got on the beat, and the beat, for some people mean, once you got your route or whatever the case.
Patrol, and yeah.
Were you able to go back to the neighborhood you grew in, or the neighborhood adjacent around the neighborhood you grew in, or you got to police a whole totally different neighborhood?
I got to actually go back to where I grew up.
Now, how did that make you feel when you got to go back to the own neighborhood? What was your mentality going into that?
It felt good. I felt like I'm gonna come back and show them that one, kids from this neighborhood can become cops and come back to the neighborhood and be the police officer. Because one of the things that when I joined the department, my biggest supporters were my cousins who were gang members. And like I said, they were original Crips and Bloods from their neighborhoods back in the '60s. When it all first started.
Right.
I grew up, like I said, I knew who Raymond Washington was. I actually got recruited by Tookie and Jamel Barnes back in the day.
Oh, I know.
They recruited me.
Okay.
So I knew who these guys were. But my cousins wanted me to not get involved in the gang because they said your mind is better than us. You can do better things than us. And when I decided to go in law enforcement, they supported me. They were my big support. They pulled me aside and said, don't forget where you grew up, don't forget how you grew up, don't forget your family, don't forget all the standards and the stuff that you've lived by all your life. Because they said you can be a good cop and do all this stuff. We want to see black officers. In fact, I've spent my entire career trying to recruit more youngsters from the neighborhoods so we can police our own neighborhoods.
You know what? It's funny you should say that, because growing up, they had something, I know you remember this, I think it was after DARE,
yes.
But it was something called Explorers or
yes.
something like
yes.
that?
Yes,
Yeah, I remember that. I wasn't a part of it, but they used to come to the school and hand out pamphlets about that so you could go into the training. And there was some kids who probably went through that, but I went another route. But how was it for you with you had the people you grew up with in LA coming back as an officer, then you had the people you work with going back to the precinct. Was there some type of a pool there? How did you
There
deal
was
with that?
tension there because of there was a style of policing that LAPD and most law enforcement agencies in California were used to doing, and I was coming in there saying that style's not going to fly in the neighborhood anymore. I spent a lot of time working where I grew up, but I spent more time working in the Watts area. I spent a lot of time working in projects, and to this day, Jordan Downs, Dixon Gardens, I still have a lot of friends over there, guys that from these rival neighborhoods that I used to put peace treaties together with. I used to sit down with and play dominoes with in uniform. I would walk in the projects and I would sit down with them, and one of the things I would tell these guys is, look, you guys grew up here. I don't live here. I grew up someplace else, but I'm here and I'm your cop too. I'm the guy that you can call on and depend on, because it didn't matter what your lifestyle was or where you're from. This is your neighborhood. I go home every day. So one of the things I would emphasize to these guys is that you finally have some officers, and I was fortunate enough to work, even when I worked gangs, I worked with about 5 guys. We all grew up in South LA.
Was that part of the crash unit?
Part of the original crash unit, yeah.
So you was around when that formed.
I was around. My uncle was on the job when it formed. He was one of the first crash officers, and he worked out before Southeast Division was built in 1978, which is when I got out of high school. So Southeast Division, which is on 108th and Main, when they built that division, they changed the lines. 77 Division used to police that area, and so when I went to 77 Division, the area I grew up in was actually belonged to which is now called Southwest, but it used to be University Division back. So the lines changed by the time I grew up. So a lot of the officers weren't the same officers that were working those neighborhoods when I was a kid. It was a lot of different guys. But I went back to 77 Division purposely because I knew that was policing the area I grew up in, this Crenshaw district. And then when I got into gangs, I wanted to work the Watts area because I had friends over there, and I knew there's a ton of good people over there. They just needed some good cops. And I actually helped bring. There was a bunch of us that we, like I said, was brothers that we all grew up in South LA, and we all went over there specifically to work that area so we could change the mode, we could change how people perceive cops, and we could get kids to believe that they can do something better than, criminal lifestyle.
So when you went, when you say you went back over there and to see if you can make change,
yes,
and you brought other people as far as your co-workers over
yes,
there, it's a double change because now you showing some of your partners, hey, these are some okay people, or not even okay people, these are some good people, good and at folks. The same time you showing the people, hey, these cops are not against you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you getting a 2 for 1.
Exactly, you hit the nail on the head. And it was funny because in front of Daryl Gates and several other chiefs back then, when I told them that's a ton of good people, Nixon Gardens, Jordan Downs, they all looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah, Daryl Gates was a tough character.
Oh, he was. Yeah. And I'm like, you guys don't get it. It's like, so, and here's a fact. I worked gangs most of my career, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to be involved with the dudes that were involved in an activity that dominate the neighborhoods. And being involved, I would try as much as I can to get them to understand we can do better than this. We don't have to victimize our own neighborhood. We can stop victimizing each other. About 1979, a year after I got out of high school, I stopped using the N-word altogether.
Oh.
Okay,
Yeah.
I refused to use the N-word, and the reason why I say this is because I read something, and I saw it again later on, where we as young black men, by using the N-word, we justify because we're not making ourselves human beings anymore. I used to tell these guys all the time, you can go to this neighborhood, and I can find a dude over there just like you in that neighborhood, and I can go to this neighborhood and find another dude just like you. Okay. We're all the same. We're all brothers. We're all from the same cloth. Okay, we might not come from the same spots in Africa or other places, but we're all African Americans that were family members who were brought here without cause. We were brought here as slaves.
True.
So we all had we all had that in our ancestry, and here we are fighting each other over what? And I said, you guys understand, if we could ever switch and get this stuff together. I used to work with Bo Taylor. Who used to be, Bo Taylor was from the West Side. He was one of the original guys doing peace treaties back in the day. I worked with Akil Bashir. Akil Bashir is a former Panther Party.
Is that before the Mike Conceptions came along?
Before Mike Conception. I knew Mike Conception growing up, but I also used to work with Jim Brown. Before he started American, I used to be one of the kids that used to go to his house and play basketball when I was a kid. And when he started American, I was part of the kids in the neighborhood that he would come to, and he would ask us what's going on, how can I change things, how can I make things better. And that's how he got started in the prison system, because I told him a lot of the guys that were calling the shots are in prison now. If you can get to them when they're getting out, they can come out and help you make change.
And see, that was my next question to you. When you was policing the neighborhood, and not really policing, but patrolling the neighborhood, let me rephrase that.
Right.
there was some G's or some people, okay, I can go talk to them, and what they say can have an effect on the younger generation that's coming up.
Exactly.
Because you knew them all.
I knew them all. Yeah, I grew up with, like I said, they were related to me, or they were like, one of my cousins was an original Swan before Swans were even Bloods.
And see, that's crazy, because I'm a late 80s, 90s generation when it comes to the streets, but in our generation, it wasn't cool to talk to the police, because if our homies seen you talk, it was something funky going on.
Right.
But when you have somebody like yourself coming through and you talking to, somebody's parents, or grandparents that been living in that same house forever, it's a different vibe.
Right.
And my next question to you is, have you ever got to patrol outside of the inner city, like, somewhere where the white community was?
I didn't, and it was by choice. Because I'm going to actually take it back. I worked specialized assignments, undercover narcotics, stuff like that, where I actually went into Hollywood, into those areas, and bought drugs from the white folks that were trying to sell it to the young black guys. Because I'm coming up, they see me as a young black dope dealer, and I would buy the drugs for them to take them out the street, because that drugs is going to end up in our neighborhoods.
Right.
So that I had a choice to do that. They asked me if I wanted to, and I said yes. But other than that, as a patrol, I never patrolled in West LA or the Valley like that. But that was by choice. There was enough officers out there.
The reason why I asked that, because me seeing both sides is, do you think there's a difference in how they police their community, how they patrol their community? Because when they get behind the young teenager white guys, they don't give them all the energy that ours would. If I'm getting pulled over in Compton on my block or somewhere, it's kind of like the scene in Boys in the Hood, when the dude, they don't
happened to me.
They don't patrol their area like that, do they?
No, and I'm gonna tell you the reason why. There's something that's a little known fact. Most of the white dudes on law enforcement are scared of deaf brothers.
Okay,
I see it all the time.
I can believe that.
Even some of the Hispanic officers, they're scared of deaf brothers. There's this fear that they have, it's an unnatural fear they have, that these brothers are more dangerous than any other individual on the street.
But that's not true.
And it's not true, but that's what's been fed into them all their lives.
Because let it be known that we have some type of fear of them when they pull us over.
Exactly.
That's why, when you get, I don't know about now, but when I was coming up as a teenager and driving in the streets, when you see a cop, you take off your hat, put your seatbelt on, you fix your seat. That's letting you know, if you wasn't scared, you would be like, to hell with him, I'm gonna keep my hat on and all that.
As a 16-year-old, I got pulled over in a carload of friends. We were coming from a football game, as a matter of fact. LAPD pulls us over. I had an officer stick a gun in my ear. Okay, we had done nothing wrong. Nothing. We hadn't violated any laws. We were just coming from a football game that we played, Westchester versus Crenshaw.
So you have your football stuff on, like your Letterman jacket?
We didn't play. We all played basketball. My friends, we all on a basketball team, so we didn't play football. But we were coming from the game. We were heading to where everybody met after the game. They pulled us over. They got us out the car. They stuck a gun in my ear. They slapped us around. We saw a black and white pull up with a white girl in the back seat. And when she pulled off, they walked away from us. And being the fact that I have family in law enforcement, I said, you got to tell us why the hell you pulled us over.
Right.
And one guy turned back, he said it, because I'm light complected. The dudes I was hanging out, we're both light complected. They said, if you guys have been dark, you'll be going to prison for rape.
Whoa.
That's what they told us.
Are you serious?
Serious. And that was one of the things that shaped me going, you know what, I'm tired of this crap. I'm going to be a cop, and I'm going to show these dudes how to do the job right.
You know what's funny? You got into law enforcement on that fact.
Yes.
But you got a lot of guys, black and white and Mexican, who get into law enforcement because they've been punked all their life.
Exactly. And that's why you see a lot of
that wasn't your reason.
No. I didn't have no reason to be fearful of anybody, because of the fact that I grew up learning the streets as a youngster, real young, from OGs. I had a cousin that's from Rolling 30s Harlem that did 35 years in prison. He got locked up in '78 on a 15 life sentence, but he was still banging, and he stabbed a guard in San Quentin, and he got in some trouble in Folsom, and next you know, he hits the streets in 2013. I still love that. I loved him to this day, and I said, and he came to me after he got out, he said, you know what, Wayne, I messed my life up. And I said, yeah, you did, but you weren't listening to the family at the time, because the family was trying to tell you you're going in the wrong direction. You're following the dudes that are not going to be good for you. He ended up taking a fall on a charge that he actually wasn't even there. And there's a whole bunch of brothers locked up right now that weren't there, but they take the fall because they don't want to be a snitch. so they take that fall. There's a lot of brothers in prison. I know when they talk about that all the time, I say there's a lot of brothers in prison. I agree with it. There's a lot of brothers in prison that don't belong in prison. They're taking a fall for somebody else because they don't want to be a snitch.
And then you figure, you know, you've been doing all this dirt your whole life, never been caught.
Right.
Now you get caught on some shit that has nothing to do with you or not fully did with you. You just getting caught up for some stuff you've been. That's how I feel.
You kind of feel like, God's make me pay.
Yeah.
That's what you kind of feel.
So now fast forward all the way up until 2020, and you have done 37 years of LAPD.
Yes.
Is this still the same funky shit going on, or it's kind of leveled out, or it's the same?
I would say it's leveled out. Rodney King made some changes. Rafael Perez made some changes. The watchdog is there. So a lot of these guys are under that. Like I said, I got a lot of people that don't like me. I did something that set me and my team apart when I was working gangs from everybody else. Chasing a guy in the project one night, a white officer tackles him to the ground, puts cuffs on him. As I'm walking up, he rolls him over, starts punching him while he's cuffed. I grabbed the officer by his collar, yanked him off and threw him on the ground. I said, first of all, he's not your suspect. You ain't got no reason to do that. And so I'm taking this brother to the station. I said, if you want to make a complaint, I'm going to bring a sergeant to him. I brought a sergeant to him. Every white boy in that station hated me for years because I brought this sergeant over and said, this brother needs to talk to you. But because he was an old school brother, he was like, nah, man, I don't snitch on cops either. And he wouldn't snitch. He wouldn't say anything. So that's the kind of stuff that we set apart where, see, they won't do it in front of me. That's like I told Chief Parks years ago when he was my bureau chief. Now, right before 1992, before the insurrection kicked off. I call it insurrection.
Oh, we
people
know
call it
riots.
Yeah, riots, whatever. But I know the reasons why people did it. I grew up with Monster Cody Scott. Little Monster was out there that day. I talked to him about that later on. But I told Chief Parks back in the day, said, when you came on that job, all these white officers used to use the N-word, and you never said a word because you couldn't. You just took that job. They wouldn't let you patrol outside of a black neighborhood. Times have changed. There's racism on the department still, but it's just undercover. They're not going to do it in front of me.
Oh, of course not.
They're not going to do it in front of my partners. You know, we put them in check from day one. They weren't allowed.
But you know when they're alone in their little group, you know.
When they're in their group and stuff like that. So I tell people all the time, racism is not going anywhere.
Is this segregation?
There used to be.
In your department?
It used to be.
Really?
It used to be. When my uncle worked Southwest, it was University Vision back then. He told me about a time in the mid-70s when black officers and white officers sit on different sides of the room and went back and took their own calls.
No.
That's something that's not a known fact because departments tried to hide that for years.
See, this is what I would call inside game.
Yes.
Because the outside, we just think, hey, we all buddies, we don't tell. But you guys deal with some inside, some internal shit that's kind of like.
I got in trouble because I did an interview for National Geographic. It was on Crips and Bloods, and I talked about the Hammer Task Force that we did after the murder in Westwood. And I said we basically effed up, and that we were treating people wrong. And I got in trouble with that because I called out our chief on that. And I said, we're pulling over people that aren't gang members and trying to put them in the system. These folks ain't gang members. We're jacking people, normal people on the street, and this is stupid. How do you want the community? How can you work with the community when you're just jacking anybody up just because? And I got in trouble for that. You know, they won't say it to my face, but I know that kept me from promoting.
But see, here's the thing. Now that you say this, see, I never met you, and I never had any encounters with you when I was backsliding in my days. Yeah. But now that you mentioned what you've been through, if more officers like yourself say, you know what, I'm standing behind what's right. Right. It's not about this gang member or that gang member who's selling drugs. You still got to treat people in a humane way, you know? Exactly. Because you can't just be pulling people over and looking all in their ass behind the car. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. You already know where I'm going with that. Exactly where you're going. But you still, you still got to treat them as a human. Right. You know, sit down, okay, the cuffs are too tight. Okay, let me, you don't got to give them the royal treatment. Right. But at the same time, this is a human being still. And that's one of the things that we've emphasized for years with the changes in the department, because I've gone to deputy chiefs and assistant chiefs and said these are changes that need to be made. One of the things is that you treat people, especially men in the neighborhood, treat them like grown men. Treat them like you want to be treated. If you treat people like grown folk, you won't have half the problems you treat them. When you come at them the way you come at them and you treat them so horrible, you expect that response.
I would respond that way if you treated me like that.
Well, I'm glad that you had a chance, and I had a chance to sit down with you and go over this, that people needed to hear coming from a person who's been on the force as long as you have, and give them some insight on that. And you know, Wayne, thank you very much for coming down, hanging out with us, and I'm sure, you know, I will run into you again. I would love to talk to you even more. Thank you for coming by, man. I appreciate it. Once again, we're on the line right here in Long Beach. This is Wayne. I'm Junior, JJ Fumby, and we out.
JJ Fumby.
Wayne Caffey.
And we continue the conversation.
But I was telling you a minute ago, I have been going to command staff at LAPD for years that requested and put more black officers in the neighborhood. A lot of them don't want to come down there because we get treated harshly. We know that certain times some of the white officers will not roll up on my backup call. If somebody's, you know, shooting at me, they might not come. We know this, okay? We know this, but like me and the guys I came up with, we're all around the same age. We decided to police the area anyway. So now we're trying to get younger officers to come back to those neighborhoods and be cops in those neighborhoods. Because I've talked to so many, even the youngsters, and I have a problem with some of the younger generation because I keep telling these guys, y'all don't have to do this. You know you don't. You have opportunities that we didn't have growing up, but you don't have to do this. But I tell them, they always say it's nice to see a face that they can recognize, somebody that's from a neighborhood that grew up like I grew up. And that's what a lot of these youngsters are telling us. They would be willing to talk to cops if they saw somebody look like them.
You know what? But the gentleman, he passed away. He's from Long Beach. He was a retired LAPD officer, and he was a known LAPD officer. I knew the gentleman that he went to my church, and his partner was Tom Bradley. Tom Bradley, former mayor of Los Angeles, was a LAPD officer before he became mayor.
Sure was.
And this guy went to my church, a deacon, a minister, became minister, and I never knew that.
Right.
But he took me up under his wing as far as helping do stuff around the church.
Okay.
And when I used to go to his house, I would see pictures of Mayor Bradley in his house, and I was like, wait a minute, Mayor Bradley was the police?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And he, deacon at my church, was a LAPD officer, and he was also in the military before he became an LAPD officer.
Right.
So it was great to see at that time that he worked in the community. I heard he was a tough cop, but he was a fair cop.
That's the point. That's the point.
And that's what I feel. As you were talking to Junior, I listened. I said, he's a cop, but he's a fair cop.
Right.
And that's all we're looking for in the community, is being fair.
That's what it's
that's what they lack. They lack this day.
That's exactly what they lack. Fairness and treat them in respect. And that's what I was taught as a kid growing up, not just by my parents, but also by my cousins. You know, like I said, they were Panthers, they were Crips, they were Bloods, they were all that. But that's what they taught me, because they were older than me, and they taught me, if you're going to do this job, which we support you tremendously, don't forget what you came up through and how you were raised and how you were taught. Because I could go in any neighborhood with my uniform on, and once I started talking, all of a sudden the attitudes would change, because they said, oh, this brother's from the neighborhood. He understands us. Because I tell him, look, I don't see bad people. I see people that are involved in activities that feel like they don't have another choice. We all have choices, because I could have been a gang member just like all the dudes I grew up with, but I decided not to. It's amazing how many come to me down. It's like, damn, Wayne, we should have followed in your footsteps. I remember a brother, I would throw his name out, they called him Big Mike. He's from 60s, all right? He saw me in county jail because I used to work the gang module with the sheriffs.
OSJ?
Yeah, I used to work in there with those guys back in the day. And he pulled me aside, and he just gotten 40 years in prison. And he said, Wayne, he says, why didn't I listen to you? I said, brother, I've been trying to get y'all to listen to me. I said, now, his son was about to graduate from high school. He was going to be at his son's graduation. They weren't going to let him out. And I felt so bad for him, but I said, you know what, dude? I will make sure that I keep an eye on your son, and I kept an eye on his son all the way till he got to college. You know, make sure that I said, he don't know me, but he'll know that I'm around, and he's got somebody he can call upon if he ever gets a bind with some bad cops.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I'm glad you stopped by, and this is something that the younger generation should look into. Like I said, we had the discussion with Junior where I believe if they had more officers that police their own community.
Yes.
Where they grew up with the school with, it wouldn't be as where it's at today.
That's where the original Panther Party was heading to. You know, when they started up in Oakland, and like I said, I got cousins that were part of the Chicago Original Panthers and the LA branch of the Panther Party. That's what they talked about. If we could police our own neighborhoods, there wouldn't be as much crime. Because one, we'd help youngsters when they needed problems. Because a lot of these brothers it's a call for help. You know, when I tell people all the time, when you join a gang in a neighborhood, in my opinion, back in those days especially, it was because you just felt like there was nothing else out there for you, and nobody was there to give you the other resources that were out there. I was pushed a different direction because of my relatives who were in the gangs that said, no, this is not for you. You can do better than this. I want the kids to understand you can do the best, but it's really a choice. And it comes down to you believing you have that choice. Because a lot of these kids don't believe they have that choice. That's why they join. You know?
Yeah, I'm just listening to you, and I'm just flashing back on myself. I had avenues, man, but I was just didn't listen.
Because the folks that raised us, they were really into the church. A lot of these kids don't even go to church anymore.
Yeah. I'm seeing that. That's where I got a cousin that he's a youth minister of my church. I go to Great Open Door Worldwide Ministry, and I think he got his degree in dealing with kids.
Right.
And he's fighting hard to keep the kids he got and get other kids. I mean, to the point where him and his wife, they encourage the kids to go to school, encourage the kids to go to college, and they go to the colleges where they graduate. And it's been, I don't know how many kids they didn't help go to college and supported them. You know what I'm saying? Some I don't know if it's financial or how they got it structured up, but they they go to their colleges with their graduations. I mean, they've been 4 or 5 different states over on the East Coast or the Midwest. They traveling to their colleges to support them and keep them from, getting caught up in the streets, man. I think it should be more of that.
A lot more of that, because there are other opportunities out there for these kids. They just don't get exposed to it enough, and they don't have somebody that gives them that avenue.
Exactly.
If these kids get that exposure and know it's there, and know that I have a chance to get to that avenue, and somebody's going to help me along, there's a lot of kids that will flip and turn their lives around. And then the more we turn around, the more we can send back, because they can go grab somebody else. It's like OG from what's my boy's name? I can't even name, but he's from the Jungles. He told me a long time, man, each one teach one. First time I'd ever heard that.
No, okay.
And he said, bringing his brothers up, and that's what he was doing. And he was like, I done been through everything, been in prison and out, but I'm trying to teach these kids you don't have to follow my footsteps. And he said, each one teach one. So every time we get something good for our young brother, send him back and let him go get somebody else. Because the closer they are to that generation, the more easily they'll listen to them.
Correct.
It's hard for them to listen to me and you, because they don't. Oh man, you've been there. You're old head. You're old head. You don't listen.
You don't understand.
Yeah, you don't get it. That's what they always tell me. You don't get it. I'm like, nah, brother, I get it.
I get it. Yeah.
Because I have my little young nephews that roll through different neighborhoods, and they're all out. They've all changed their life. I had a nephew that was, out of pain for a loss of a family member. He started to hang out in the neighborhood. Next thing you know, he's on the streets, and for years he was afraid I'd find him out there. He was saying that with the 60s, and I said, dude, I knew you were out there. I was just keeping an eye on you from a distance, but I told the older dudes to watch out for you. Now he's a chef.
Wow.
Now he's a chef. He went to Cordon Bleu and got his life together and changed his life.
Okay. That is some positive stuff in there.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I don't want to hold you up no more than you had. I really appreciate you coming through, man. Hopefully in the future that you can come out, stop at the office or stop at the mansion, man, and come by and chop it up and more with us, man. I appreciate that.
Daryl's been trying to set this up so I can talk with you guys. I told Daryl
it's beautiful.
Name the day.
This is a great day.
Brother.
Appreciate that, black man.
Every day on the line. Every day on the line. Every day digital soapbox. Every day on the line. I remain every day on the line. Every day on the